The throne room of Emperor Vexthon was built to remind the galaxy who ruled it. Every surface gleamed with polished gold and obsidian, reflecting the light of 1,000 hovering orbs that drifted silently through the vast chamber. Below them, the floor stretched wide enough to fit an entire army formation, yet only a handful of figures dared stand upon it at any given time. Power did not require crowds. Power required distance. Vexthon sat upon his elevated throne, a structure carved from the core of a dead star, its surface still faintly glowing with ancient energy. From here he looked down upon everything, his court, his commanders, and the endless stream of reports that defined his empire. 3,000 years. That was how long the Zaphirian Empire had expanded without interruption. 847 star systems now answered to his command. Entire civilizations reduced to subjects, their cultures absorbed, their resistance erased or repurposed. Some had surrendered the moment his fleets appeared. Others had fought briefly. None had lasted. Not one. A holographic display hovered before him, cycling through updates from across the empire. Resource yields, population compliance metrics, fleet readiness reports. Every number reinforced the same simple truth. Nothing in the galaxy could challenge him. A soft set of footsteps broke the silence. His aide approached carefully, each of his 4 hands clasped together in practiced submission. Even after decades of service, the creature never forgot where he stood. "Your Majesty," the aide said, his voice controlled but edged with something Vexthon immediately noticed. "Our outer scouts have returned with a report." Vexthon did not look up at first. Reports were constant. Most were irrelevant. "Another system requesting integration?" he asked flatly. "Not exactly, sir." That made him pause. Slowly, the Emperor lifted his gaze. His red eyes glowed faintly, narrowing with interest. "Explain." The aide hesitated for the briefest moment, just enough to confirm that this was not routine. "They have achieved early interstellar capability," he said. "Primitive but functional. However, they have refused our authority." The throne room seemed to grow quieter. Vexthon leaned back slightly, the corners of his mouth curling, not in anger, but in something closer to amusement. "Refused," he repeated. The word sounded almost unfamiliar. In 3,000 years, it had rarely been spoken in this context. Not without immediate consequences. "Show me," he said. The aide activated a projection. A small planet appeared in the center of the chamber, rotating slowly in perfect detail. Blue oceans, green land masses, white cloud systems swirling across its surface. Orbital structures surrounded it, rudimentary stations, scattered fleets, faint signals of organized activity. "They call themselves humans," the aide continued. "The planet is designated Earth." Vexthon studied it in silence. It looked ordinary. No massive defense arrays, no planetary shields, no signs of advanced weaponization, just scattered infrastructure and limited orbital presence. "How far behind?" he asked. "Approximately 5 centuries by our estimates. 500 years. Vexthon let out a quiet breath that almost resembled a laugh. Insignificant. He had conquered species who were closer than that and still watched them crumble within days. A gap of 5 centuries was not a challenge. It was a formality. "And our offer?" he asked. "Delivered according to standard protocol. Full surrender in exchange for continued existence under imperial governance." "And their response?" The aide shifted slightly. "They declined, Your Majesty." Vexthon's gaze returned to the planet. "Declined," he said again, softer this time. There was no anger in his voice, not yet, just curiosity. "Did they misunderstand the terms?" "No, sir, their message was clear. Play it." The projection shifted. A transmission log unfolded, the recorded response displayed in its original form. Simple, direct, polite. A refusal. No demands. No negotiations. No attempt to bargain for survival, just no. For a long moment, Vexthon said nothing. Then he stood. The movement alone was enough to send a ripple of tension through the chamber. His full height cast a long shadow across the polished floor, stretching toward the image of Earth as if to swallow it. "No one declines the Empire," he said calmly. There was no need to raise his voice. The weight behind the words was enough. The aide lowered his head. "Of course, Your Majesty." Vexthon stepped down from his throne, approaching the projection slowly. He circled it once, observing the world from every angle, as if searching for something hidden beneath its surface. There was nothing. No sign of defiance. No visible strength. Just a quiet world that had made a very loud mistake. "Send a fleet," he said. The aide straightened slightly. "Size, Your Majesty?" Vexthon considered for a moment. Then he dismissed the question with a small wave of his hand. "A demonstration will be sufficient," he replied. "Enough to remind them how the galaxy functions." The aide bowed deeply. "At once." As he turned to leave, Vexthon's gaze lingered on the rotating planet. 847 systems, 3,000 years. Not a single one had ever said no and survived. Earth would not be the first. Behind him, the throne room returned to silence, but the atmosphere had shifted, not with tension, not with fear, but with inevitability. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of his empire, a small blue world continued to spin peacefully in the void, unaware that it had just been marked. Next, the message reached Earth long before the fleet did. It arrived without warning, cutting through every communication channel the humans possessed as if their networks weren't even there. Military satellites, civilian relays, deep space receivers, it didn't matter. The signal appeared everywhere at once, precise and impossible to ignore. It was short, structured, formal. The Zaphirian Empire extended its offer of integration, total surrender, immediate compliance, continued existence permitted under imperial rule. There were no threats written into the message. There didn't need to be. On the bridge of the lead command station orbiting Earth, a handful of officers stood in silence as the transmission replayed for the third time. No one spoke at first. Not because they didn't understand it, but because they understood it perfectly. "They sent that to everyone?" one of the junior analysts asked quietly. "Yes," another replied, eyes fixed on the data streams. "Every major system, civilian channels included. A deliberate move, not just communication, pressure." At the center of the room, Admiral Sarah Chen sat behind a plain metal desk that looked almost out of place among the layers of advanced displays surrounding it. Her posture was relaxed, hands folded lightly in front of her as she reviewed the incoming data. No urgency, no visible concern. "Do we have visual confirmation yet?" she asked. A tactical officer nodded. Long-range sensors picked up a fleet formation at the edge of the system. "They haven't moved in yet, but—" He hesitated. "But?" Chen prompted. "They want us to see them." A new projection appeared, in the center of the room. 200 ships. Even at that distance, their scale was unmistakable. Massive structures of dark metal arranged in clean, disciplined formation. No wasted movement, no unnecessary signals. Just presence. A wall. Someone. In the room let out a slow breath. "That's not subtle." "No," Chen said calmly. "It isn't supposed to be." Another officer stepped forward. "Standard procedure would suggest opening negotiations. Buy time. Assess." "They already assessed us," Chen interrupted gently. "This isn't a conversation. It's a script." The room fell quiet again. Outside the station, Earth rotated slowly beneath them, billions of lives continuing as normal, for now. "They're giving us an hour," the tactical officer added. "Based on their current position and approach. Speed." Chen nodded once, as if confirming something she had already expected. "Then let's not waste it." She reached forward and activated the outbound channel. "Open a direct line," she said. "Highest priority." The system complied instantly. Across the void, the signal cut through space and locked onto the incoming fleet's command frequency. On the bridge of the Zaphirian flagship, Commander Star stood with his hands clasped behind, his back watching the small blue planet grow slightly larger on the main display. He had expected panic. He had expected noise. Instead, his communications officer turned toward him with visible confusion. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." Star allowed himself a faint smile. "Already?" he said. "Efficient." He stepped forward. "Put it on screen." The display shifted. For a brief moment, there was only static. Then the image resolved. Human female. Older, by the look of her, with short gray hair and a uniform that lacked any of the elaborate markings Zatar associated with command authority. She sat behind a simple desk, her expression neutral, her eyes steady. No fear, no urgency, just focus. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Grid," she said, her voice clear and level. "We've received your Empire's offer." Zatar inclined his head slightly, waiting. There was a pause. Not long, but deliberate. Then she continued. "We respectfully decline." Silence settled across the Zaphirian bridge. Star blinked once as if he had misheard. "Decline?" he repeated. Chen gave a small nod. "That is correct." Zatar studied her carefully now, searching for something, uncertainty, hesitation, anything that would make sense of what he was hearing. He found nothing. "Do you understand what you are facing?" he asked. Her expression didn't change. "We do," she replied. Tar gestured toward the display behind him, where the full formation of his fleet was now clearly visible. 200 warships, he said, each capable of leveling your cities. "They're improving," Star said. The bridge fell silent. His tactical officer looked up. "Sir?" "They're not just avoiding our fire," Star continued, his voice low. "They're adjusting to it." Another explosion lit up the display, one of his cruisers this time, torn apart from a perfectly placed strike along its exposed flank. "They've stopped making the same errors," Star added. The implication settled heavily over the room. "They're learning," someone said quietly. Star didn't correct them, because it was true. Every engagement, every exchange of fire, it was all being processed. The humans weren't fighting the same battle they had started. They were evolving within it. A new alert cut through the tension. "Sir, enemy vessels are concentrating on our outer defensive ring." Star turned toward the display. A cluster of human ships had shifted positions, converging briefly before splitting apart again. But in that short moment, they had focused fire on a single section of the formation. 3 ships gone in seconds. "They're targeting weak points," the tactical officer said. "Sections where our coverage overlaps inefficiently." Star's jaw tightened. Those weaknesses weren't obvious. They weren't supposed to be. Yet the humans had found them and were exploiting them with precision that bordered on surgical. "Reinforce that sector," he ordered. "We're trying, sir, but every time we shift to compensate, they strike somewhere else." Of course they did. Zatar watched as another group of human ships slipped through a gap created by his own repositioning, appearing behind one of his heavier vessels before unloading another devastating volley. Cause-effect. They weren't just reacting. They were guiding the battle, forcing him to move exactly where they wanted. "They're controlling the flow," Star said, almost to himself. The realization felt cold, uncomfortable. This wasn't how combat worked. Not against a technologically inferior opponent. Not against a species that by every measurable standard should have been overwhelmed within minutes. And yet... "Sir," the communications officer said, voice strained. "We're receiving internal reports from multiple ships. Crews are unsettled." Star didn't need details. He could feel it, the shift in atmosphere, the subtle breakdown of certainty. For the first time in years, his fleet wasn't dictating the battle. They were responding to it. "Pull back to long-range engagement," he ordered suddenly. Several heads turned. "Sir?" "They're exploiting close-range maneuverability," Star said. "We maintain distance. We regain control. Our firepower advantage still holds at range. It was the logical move. Create space. reset the engagement, force the humans into a position where their agility mattered less. Execute withdrawal pattern, he continued. Across the fleet, engines flared. The massive Zaphirian ships began to shift, pulling away from the chaotic center of the battlefield, trying to reestablish a controlled perimeter. For a brief moment it seemed to work. Distance opened. Firing lines stabilized, reacquiring targets. The officer stopped mid-sentence. "Sir?" "They're following us." Zitar's eyes snapped back to the display. Human ships accelerated. Not randomly, directly. They didn't break off. They didn't retreat. They surged forward, maintaining pressure, slipping between the withdrawing vessels, and striking at any ship that lagged behind. "They're not letting us disengage," the tactical officer said. Of course they weren't. Tar felt the last pieces of his earlier confidence finally begin to fracture. This wasn't a defensive force. This wasn't desperation. This was control. Another explosion, then another. Ships at the rear of his formation were being picked off one by one, unable to keep pace with the sudden shift in movement. "Maintain cohesion," Zitar snapped, but cohesion required predictability, and the humans had made sure there was none. By the time the fleet reached a safer distance, the damage had already been done. "Updated count," Zitar said. The response came slower this time. 158 ships operational, sir." Silence followed. Star stared at the display. They had lost over 40 ships, to an opponent that should not have been capable of this, to an opponent that was still adapting, still improving, still learning. His gaze shifted to the human fleet, now regrouping near their planet. They moved differently now, tighter coordination, cleaner formations, smoother transitions between maneuvers. Not chaotic anymore. Refined. As if the battle itself had been a lesson. "What do we tell the Emperor?" the communications officer asked quietly. Star didn't answer immediately. He watched the human ships for a long moment, studying the way they repositioned, the way they anticipated movement before it happened. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. "Tell him the truth," Star said at last. "And that is, sir?" Star's voice dropped, quieter than before. "They're dangerous." He paused, eyes still fixed on the enemy. "More dangerous than anything we've ever encountered." Next, Emperor Vexthon read the report in silence. Once, then again, and a third time. The numbers did not change. 40 ships lost. Dozens more damaged. A retreat forced against a species that, by every measure the Empire had ever used, should not have survived first contact. The chamber around him remained perfectly still. No one spoke. No one dared. "Dangerous," Vexthon repeated quietly. The word echoed differently now, not as an insult, not as a dismissal, as a possibility. He lowered the report slowly, his red eyes drifting toward the vast star map projected across the far wall. Hundreds of systems glowed under Imperial control, each one a testament to 3,000 years of uninterrupted dominance. And now, a single world had introduced uncertainty. "They are 500 years behind us," he said. No one answered, because the report in his hand said otherwise. "Your Majesty," his aide said carefully, stepping forward. "Commander Zatar has requested reinforcements." Vexthon's gaze hardened. "Reinforcements," he repeated, "for a primitive world." There it was. The fracture. Pride pushing against reality. "They exploited weaknesses in our fleet structure," the aide continued cautiously. "Their tactics are unconventional." "Everything is unconventional until it is understood," Vexthon replied sharply. He rose from his throne. The motion carried weight now, not just authority, but something else beneath it. A tension that hadn't existed before. "No species adapts faster than the Empire," he said. "If they believe they've found an advantage, we will remove it." He stepped down, stopping before the star map. The blue point representing Earth pulsed faintly at the edge of his domain. Insignificant. It should have remained insignificant. "Send the 12th Imperial Armada," he said. The room reacted, not visibly. But the shift was there. That wasn't a demonstration force. That was annihilation. 800 ships, the aide confirmed quietly. Under War Marshal Vexthon, Vexthon nodded once. I want this resolved, he said. Completely. The aide bowed deeply. At once, Your Majesty. Within hours, orders spread across the Empire. Within days, the Armada was in motion. War Marshal Vexthon stood on the bridge of his flagship as the fleet assembled around him. Hundreds of vessels falling into perfect formation, their combined mass enough to darken entire regions of space. He had led 23 planetary conquests. He had crushed rebellions before they began. He had never lost. This is excessive, one of his officers remarked quietly, watching the formation stabilize. For a single system. Vexthon didn't respond immediately. He had read Star's report. Every line of it, not dismissed it, not ignored it, but weighed it. Then we will ensure it is sufficient, he said at last. He turned toward the main display. Prepare for jump. The fleet vanished and reappeared at the edge of the human system. What Vexthon expected to see was simple: a damaged enemy, scattered survivors. Perhaps remnants of Star's fleet regrouping for reinforcement. What he saw instead made him pause. Debris. Drifting. Wreckage-filled sections of the system, twisted metal, shattered hulls, fragments of ships that had once carried Imperial insignia, not human ships. Zaphirian. His eyes narrowed. Where is the 47th Fleet? He asked. Scanning, detecting approximately 30 remaining vessels, sir, the tactical officer replied. They're positioned behind one of the outer planets. 30 out of 200. Vexthon felt something cold settle in his chest. They weren't repelled, he said quietly. They were dismantled. Before anyone could respond, a familiar alert sounded. Incoming transmission. Vexthon didn't hesitate. On screen. The image resolved quickly. The same human woman, same posture, same calm expression, as if nothing had changed. Welcome back, Admiral Chen said. Vexthon studied her carefully. No strain, no urgency, no sign that she was facing 800 warships. I am War Marshal Vexthon of the Zaphirian Empire, he said. You will surrender immediately or your world will be destroyed. Chen inclined her head slightly. I'm afraid our position hasn't changed, she replied. Vexthon watched her in silence for a moment. You defeated one fleet, he said. Through tactics we have now observed and adapted to, you face a different force now. Larger, Chen agreed. Stronger, debatable. A few officers on the bridge shifted. Vexthon ignored them. There is no outcome here that favors you, he said. Chen's expression didn't change. We've been studying your technology, she said instead. Vexthon frowned slightly. Studying? The wreckage you left behind was very informative. A quiet ripple passed through the bridge. Vexthon felt it too. Something tightening. You reverse-engineered Imperial systems in days? One of his science officers whispered. Chen's lips curved. Faintly. We learn quickly. Vexthon's gaze hardened. Learning will not save you. Maybe not, Chen said calmly. But it helps. The transmission cut. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Vexthon turned away. Form attack lines, he ordered. Full engagement. 800 ships moved as one. A perfect machine. Disciplined. Overwhelming. This time, there would be no uncertainty, no improvisation, no gaps to exploit. The human ships appeared ahead of them. More than before. Not many more, but enough to notice. And different. Subtle changes in structure. New configurations. Altered weapon mounts. Vexthon's eyes narrowed. They upgraded, he said. In 3 days, an officer replied. Vexthon didn't answer. Because the battle had already begun. Human ships surged forward. Faster than before. Cleaner. Sharper. Their movements no longer resembled chaos. They resembled intent. A group of them cut directly through the outer formation, weaving between Zaphirian vessels with precision that bordered on impossible. Open fire. The fleet responded instantly. But again, the targets weren't where they should have been. And this time, when the humans fired back, the results were worse, much worse. A Zaphirian cruiser's shields flickered, then failed instantly. A projectile passed through as if the defense wasn't even there, detonating deep within the ship's core. It didn't explode outward. It collapsed inward. Gone in seconds. They've changed their weapons, the tactical officer said, voice tight. Not just changed, another added. Improved. Vexthon felt the realization settle piece by piece. They're using our technology, he said, and making it better. Around him, the formation began to fracture, not from lack of discipline, from pressure. Human ships flowed through the gaps like water, striking weak points before vanishing again into the chaos. 800 ships. And somehow, it didn't feel like enough. Next, the battle lasted 6 hours. Not because the Zaphirian fleet lacked firepower, not because they held back, but because nothing they did seemed to matter. War Marshal Vexthon stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the numbers fall. 800 had become 700, 700 became 6. Every loss was clean, precise, intentional. There was no randomness to it, no wasted motion. Report, he said. 612 ships remaining. Sir. And the enemy? Approximately 170 still operational. The disparity should have meant victory. It didn't. Across the battlefield, human ships moved with terrifying coordination. Not a single vessel acted independently. Every maneuver supported another. Every strike opened an opportunity somewhere else. They're not just faster, his tactical officer said. They're synchronized. Vexthon didn't respond. He had already seen it, watched it unfold. At first, they had fought like unpredictable animals, erratic, hard to track, difficult to engage. Now they moved like a single organism, a system. No delays, no hesitation, no miscommunication. They're sharing data in real time, the science officer added. Every ship is updating based on every engagement. Vexthon's grip tightened behind his back. That explained it. Every shot fired at them, every formation shift, every defensive adjustment, all of it became information, and the humans were using it immediately. They're not just reacting, he said quietly. They're evolving, as if to confirm it. A cluster of human ships shifted formation mid-engagement, adjusting their attack vectors to bypass a defensive pattern his fleet had implemented only minutes earlier. They adapted already? An officer whispered. Vexthon didn't answer, because the truth was worse. They anticipated it, he said. Another section of the fleet collapsed. 3 ships gone, then 5 more. No warning. No buildup. Just absence. They're targeting command relays, the tactical officer reported. Disrupting coordination nodes. Vexthon turned sharply. How? They're identifying them faster than we can mask them. Of course, they were. Every system, every structure, every tactic. Nothing stayed hidden for long. The humans weren't just fighting his fleet. They were dissecting it, piece by piece. Sir, the science officer said again, more urgently this time. Our analysis suggests, say it. A pause. Then, they're treating this battle as a learning exercise. Silence. The words settled across the bridge like a physical weight. Vexthon stared at the display, ships burning, formations collapsing, and the humans, adapting, improving, refining. You are telling me, he said slowly, that they're not trying to win, the officer swallowed. They are, sir. But that may not be their primary objective. Vexthon felt something cold spread through him. Not fear, not yet, but something close enough to recognize. They're using us, he said. No one argued. Because it fit. Every engagement, every exchange, every loss his fleet suffered made the humans better. "They're studying us," he said again. Quieter this time. A predator didn't rush a kill. A predator learned first. Another explosion lit up the display, closer this time. His flagship trembled slightly as debris scattered past the outer shields. "They're closing distance on command." "Vessels," the tactical officer warned. Dexmoor's eyes snapped back to the battlefield. A human cruiser had broken through multiple defensive layers, moving faster than anything its size should have been capable of. It appeared beside one of his command escorts and fired a single shot. It didn't hit the shields. It passed through them, clean, as if they weren't there. The projectile struck the escort's core. The ship died instantly. No explosion, just shut down. "How?" Vexthon demanded. "They're modulating frequencies," the science officer said, voice strained. "Matching our shield harmonics. They know our systems better than we do." Vexthon stared at the data. Impossible. That level of understanding required time, testing, iteration. "They shouldn't have that," he said. "They didn't," the officer replied quietly. "They do now, because of us." The realization hit harder than anything else. Every second of this battle had been a gift to them. Vexthon exhaled slowly, then made a decision. "All ships," he said, his voice steady again. "Begin retreat." Several officers turned toward him. "Sir, we cannot win this engagement at close range," he continued. "We pull back, regroup, and initiate orbital bombardment. If we cannot defeat their fleet..." He paused, then finished it. "We remove the planet." It was a brutal solution, but it was still a solution. The order went out. Across the fleet, engines flared as Zaphirian ships began to disengage, turning away from the chaotic battlefield and pushing toward long-range positions. For a moment, it seemed possible. Distance began to open. Human ships fell back slightly, then disappeared. "They're breaking off?" one officer asked. Vexthon watched carefully. "No," he said. "They're repositioning." And then they came back. From everywhere, hidden among asteroids, behind debris fields, from vectors his fleet hadn't even been monitoring. "They predicted the retreat," the tactical officer said. "Of course they did." Human ships surged into the withdrawing formation, targeting the weakest points, the slowest vessels, the damaged ships, the ones struggling to maintain formation. What had been a retreat became something else. Rear line collapsing. "We're losing cohesion!" Multiple ships disabled. Vexthon didn't speak. He watched as his fleet, his perfect, disciplined, overwhelming force, broke apart under pressure it couldn't respond to. By the time they reached minimum, safe distance, it was over. Not the battle, but the outcome. "Final count," he said quietly. The response came after a long pause. 193 ships remaining operational, sir." "From 800. Vexthon closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. On the display, human ships regrouped near their planet, moving with that same cold precision. No celebration, no hesitation. Just readiness. "They didn't chase us," one officer said. "No," Vexthon replied. "They didn't need to. Because they had already learned everything they came for." He turned away from the display. "Open. A channel," he said. "Yes, sir." The communication system activated. Recording. Vexthon stood still for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Then, "Your Majesty," he began. His voice carried none of the confidence it once had. "The human threat is beyond anything we have encountered." He paused, glancing once more at the battlefield. "They do not simply fight to win." Another pause. "They fight to learn." Silence filled the bridge as he continued. "Every ship we lose improves them. Every tactic we use becomes their advantage. They adapt faster than we can respond." He exhaled slowly. "They are not soldiers." His eyes narrowed slightly. "They are predators who think." The transmission ended. For the first time in his career, War Marshal Vexthon understood what defeat felt like. Next Emperor Vexthon did not speak for a long time after the transmission ended. The chamber remained silent, the final words of war. Marshal Vexthon still echoing faintly in the air. Predators who think. The phrase lingered, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. Vexthon stood slowly from his throne, his massive form casting a long shadow across the polished floor. Around him, his advisors remained perfectly still, waiting for a reaction that did not come. 600 ships, gone, not scattered, not damaged, destroyed. His most experienced commander, defeated, not by overwhelming force, but by something far worse. Understanding. They learned, Vexthon said quietly. No one answered, because there was nothing to add. He turned toward the grand star map that dominated the far wall. Hundreds of systems glowed under imperial control, worlds taken over centuries, civilizations bent into submission through strength and inevitability. And now, something had appeared that did not follow those rules. Recall all available fleets, he said. The words were calm, measured, absolute. The room shifted instantly. Your Majesty? His aide asked carefully. All fleets? Every ship we can spare, Vexthon replied. Pull them from border systems, interior patrols, occupation forces. A pause. Even if it weakens our outer territories. Vexthon's eyes burned faintly as he turned back. If these humans are what Vexthon believes they are, he said, then nothing else matters. The aide bowed immediately. At once, Your Majesty. Orders spread like a shockwave across the Empire. Ships disengaged from distant conflicts, patrol routes collapsed. Entire sectors reported reduced defenses as fleets were redirected toward a single point. Home. Within 2 weeks, the largest armada in Zaphirian history assembled in orbit of the imperial capital. 3,000 ships. Dreadnoughts capable of cracking. Planetary cores. Carrier groups filled with thousands of strike craft, support vessels, command ships, logistical units. An entire war machine concentrated into one unstoppable force. At its center, the Infinite Dominion, the Emperor's flagship. Super dreadnought unlike anything else in the fleet, its structure vast enough to function as a mobile command world. Its weapons alone could reduce continents to ash. Vexthon stood on its bridge, looking out over the assembled armada. 3,000 ships, 60% of his empire's total military strength. No civilization had ever faced this and survived. No civilization ever would. Begin the jump, he commanded. Across the fleet, space itself seemed to fold. 3,000 ships vanished and reappeared at the edge of the human system. Vexthon expected resistance, fortifications, desperation, some sign that the enemy understood the scale of what was coming. Instead, he saw them, 200 ships, the same number reported in previous engagements, positioned calmly near their planet, not scattered, not retreating, waiting. Vexthon stared at the display. That's it? He asked. His tactical officer double-checked the readings. Confirmed, Your Majesty. Approximately 200 vessels. Same general configuration as before. Vexthon's gaze hardened. No reinforcements? None detected. No planetary defenses? Minimal, sir. No evacuation, no panic. Nothing. Just stillness. A notification appeared. Incoming transmission. Vexthon didn't hesitate. On screen, the image resolved. Admiral Chen, exactly as before. Same posture, same calm expression. As if the arrival of 3,000 warships meant nothing at all. Your Majesty, she said politely. An honor to meet you. Vexthon leaned slightly forward, in his command throne. You are responsible for the destruction of my fleets, he said. We defended ourselves, Chen replied. You faced the largest military force ever assembled, Vexthon continued. 3,000 ships. There is no outcome here that favors you. Chen nodded once. It is an impressive fleet, she said. There was no sarcasm, no fear, just acknowledgement. Then you understand your position. I understand it perfectly, she replied. Vexthon studied her closely. Something was wrong. Not with her words, with her tone. There was no tension, no urgency, no calculation of survival, just calm. Then explain something to me, Chen said. Vexthon's eyes narrowed slightly. Speak. She tilted her head just a fraction. You keep referring to us as a military force. A pause. That is what you are, Vexthon said. Chen shook her head gently. No, Your Majesty. Another pause. Short. Precise. Then, what you've been fighting is our Coast Guard. Silence. Absolute. Total. The words didn't register at first. Not fully. Vexthon blinked once. Then again. Repeat that, he said. Chen's expression didn't change. The ships you engaged, she said calmly, are part of our local defense grid. They handle piracy, smuggling, minor threats. The bridge of the Infinite Dominion felt colder. 3,000 ships against police. No, Vexthon said quietly. It wasn't denial. It was rejection of reality itself. That is not possible. I understand your confusion, Chen continued. Most species structure their forces differently. Vexthon leaned forward, his voice tightening. Then where is your military? For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not much, but enough. Busy, she said. The transmission ended. Vexthon stared at the empty screen. Around him, no one moved. No one spoke. Then, Your Majesty, the communications officer said, voice strained. We're receiving priority alerts from across the Empire. Vexthon didn't look away from the screen. What kind of alerts? Unknown fleets appearing in multiple systems. A pause. Human fleets. That got his attention. Show me. The display changed, and for the first time, Vexthon felt it. Not anger, not rage, something colder. Fear. Images flooded the screen. Dozens of systems, imperial worlds, shipyards, industrial centers, and in each one, human ships, different from the ones. At Earth, larger, heavier, clearly military, not attacking, not firing, just there waiting. How many? Vexthon asked quietly. 47 confirmed systems so far, the officer replied. All high-value targets. Vexthon's mind raced. While he had focused everything on Earth, they had moved everywhere. How? He asked. No one had an answer. Another transmission request appeared. Chen again. Vexthon accepted it immediately. She appeared exactly as before. Calm. Unchanged. I thought you might have questions, she said. Vexthon leaned forward, his voice low. How did you do this? Chen folded her hands lightly on the desk. We've been watching your empire for a long time, she said. Studying your movements, your priorities, your weaknesses. Vexthon's eyes narrowed. That would take months, years, Chen corrected gently. A pause. Decades, actually. The implication hit hard. You've been planning this. We've been preparing, she replied. Vexthon looked back at the map. 47 systems, surrounded, not invaded, not destroyed, controlled. You have my empire at your throat, he said. We have assets positioned to ensure you understand the situation. Chen replied calmly. Vexthon turned back to her. What do you want? The same thing we wanted at the beginning, she said, a small pause. To be left alone. Silence settled between them. 3,000 ships. And none of them mattered anymore. For the first time in 3,000 years, Vexthon realized he was not the most powerful force in the galaxy. Next, Vexthon stood alone in the observation chamber of the Infinite Dominion. Behind him, the bridge remained in controlled silence. No alarms, no frantic movement. Just officers frozen in the weight of information that no doctrine in the Empire had ever prepared them for. 47 systems. Compromised. Not destroyed. Not conquered. Positioned. Like a hand closing slowly around a throat that had not yet realized it was being held. Vexthon stared through the massive viewport. Space stretched endlessly ahead, cold and indifferent, and somewhere beyond that void, Earth hung like a small blue mark that had somehow rewritten the meaning of dominance itself. "Say it again," he said quietly. His tactical officer hesitated. "Human fleets are present in 47 Imperial systems, Your Majesty, all major industrial hubs, shipyards, core logistics routes." Vexthon didn't move. "How many ships total?" he asked. A pause. "We cannot confirm exact numbers, sir." That answer alone was worse than a number. He turned slightly. "Explain." The officer swallowed. "Their formations are different from the Earth engagement forces. Larger vessels, heavier armament profiles, but they are not engaging. They are holding position outside critical zones." "Occupation," someone muttered. "No," Vexthon said immediately. The word didn't feel correct. Occupation implied force being applied. This felt more like presence, deliberate, calculated, patient, a reminder, not an action. Vexthon walked slowly toward the central holographic display. The star map shimmered to life as he approached, systems lighting up across Imperial space, each one marked with a faint, unfamiliar signature. Human. "How long have they been in position?" he asked. "Best estimates suggest simultaneous deployment," the science officer replied. "Within hours of Earth engagement escalation." That finally drew a reaction. Vexthon's eyes narrowed slightly. "Hours." "Yes, Your Majesty. 3,000 ships had been gathered. A force meant to end all resistance, and while he had focused it on one world, they had moved across his empire like they had already known where he would look. "Impossible," he said again. But this time, it didn't sound certain. The doors, behind him, opened. His aide entered carefully, holding a datapad as if it might burn him. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "we are receiving civilian reports from multiple systems." Vexthon turned. "What kind of reports?" "Panic is spreading," the aide admitted. "Not from attacks, from presence." Vexthon stared at him. "Explain that." The aide hesitated. "They're not firing, sir. They're not issuing demands. They're just there, over shipyards, over trade hubs, watching." A pause. "People are interpreting it as a warning." Vexthon exhaled slowly through his nose. A warning, without a shot fired, without a threat spoken. Just placement. Strategic silence. He turned back to the map. 47 systems. If they struck, if they truly intended, or his empire would fracture before he could respond, and yet they hadn't struck. Why? "Open a channel to Admiral Chen," he said. The system complied instantly. The familiar image appeared, still calm, still composed, still sitting behind that simple desk as if the galaxy outside her mattered less than the conversation itself. "Your Majesty," she said politely. Vexthon did not return the courtesy. "You are in 47 of my systems," he said. "Yes," she replied. "Explain." Chen leaned back slightly. "We've positioned assets near key infrastructure," she said, "to ensure stability." "Stability," Vexthon repeated. "Yes," his eyes hardened. "That is not stability. That is control." Chen didn't disagree. She also didn't confirm it. A silence stretched between them. Then Vexthon spoke again, slower this time. "You are holding my empire at risk." "We are preventing escalation," she corrected gently. "That is the same thing." "No," Chen said. "It isn't." Another pause. Then she continued. "If we wanted your empire destroyed, it would already be collapsing. No emotion, no emphasis, just fact." The words struck harder than any threat. Vexthon's jaw tightened slightly. "You expect me to accept that?" he said. "I expect you to observe it," she replied. Silence. On the bridge behind him, no one dared interrupt. Vexthon stared at her for a long moment, then asked the question that had been forming since Earth. "What are you?" Chen tilted her head slightly. "A civilization that prefers not to be disturbed," she said simply. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters. Another silence. Longer this time. Vexthon turned slightly, looking again at the map. 47 systems. No battles. No resistance. Just placement. Control without destruction. And still, no demand for surrender. That was the most disturbing part. Not conquest, not aggression, restraint. Finally, he spoke again. What happens if I order my fleets to engage your positions? For the first time, Chen's expression changed. Not fear, not anger. Something quieter, less human. Then, she said, you will learn why we separated those forces from Earth. The implication hung in the air. Vexthon didn't respond immediately. He understood war. He understood power. But this was not either. This was architecture. Designed outcomes. Controlled visibility. A system that allowed him to believe he still had choices while ensuring he only had one. You are not defending Earth, he said slowly. Chen's gaze held steady. No, she replied. A pause. We already did that. Vexthon's eyes narrowed. Then what is this? Chen looked at him for a long moment. Containment, she said. And then, the transmission ended. The bridge remained silent. Vexthon stood motionless, staring at the empty screen. 47 systems, a galaxy-spanning net. And at its center, a small blue world that had never once panicked. Behind him, one of his officers finally spoke. Your Majesty, what are your orders? Vexthon did not answer immediately. For the first time in his reign, orders no longer felt like something the galaxy would obey. Next, Vexthon remained standing long after the transmission ended. The bridge of the infinite dominion felt different now. Not damaged, not threatened, just smaller. As if the walls themselves had realized they were no longer the limit of anything important. 47 systems. Containment. The word refused to leave his mind. He walked slowly toward the central command dais. Every step echoed through the chamber with unnatural clarity. Around him, officers pretended to work, but their attention kept drifting to him, waiting for direction that no longer seemed obvious. Status of external fleets, he finally said. His tactical officer hesitated. Before responding, all human positions remain static, Your Majesty. No aggression detected. No expansion. No withdrawals. Vexthon's eyes narrowed. So they are watching. Yes, sir. Like a net. Vexthon muttered. No one corrected him, because no one could think of a better word. A containment net, stretched across his empire, anchored at key systems, silently holding everything in place without tightening further. Waiting. For what? He turned sharply. Show me the empire-wide projection. The holographic map expanded instantly. Hundreds of systems, dozens of sectors, and scattered across it, human signatures, not clustered, not random, strategic, every placement aligned with something deeper than geography. Supply lines, industrial chains, communication routes, fleet staging corridors. Vexthon stared at it for a long moment. Then he said quietly, They are not occupying us. The science officer spoke carefully. No, Your Majesty. They are mapping us, Vexthon continued. A pause, and locking the map in place. Silence followed, because now the implication was clear. This was not invasion, not war, not even conquest. It was constraint, a system designed to prevent movement itself. The aide stepped forward cautiously. Your Majesty, civilian unrest is increasing. Several governors are requesting permission to mobilize defense fleets. Vexthon didn't look away from the hologram. And if they do? The aide hesitated. We believe the human fleets would respond. Respond how? No answer came quickly enough. That was the answer. Vexthon exhaled slowly. So every action we take triggers a response. Yes, sir. A controlled environment, not battle, a simulation with consequences. He turned away from the map. Contact. Admiral Chen again. The officers exchanged quick glances. Immediately, Your Majesty. The transmission re-established. Chen appeared. Still unchanged. Still calm. As if time itself had no effect on her composure. Your Majesty, she said. Vexthon didn't waste words. You are restricting my empire's movement. We are preventing escalation, she corrected. That is restriction. It is boundary enforcement. The phrase landed heavier than intended. Vexthon stepped closer to the display. You are treating an empire of thousands of systems like a single enclosed space. Chen nodded once. Yes. No hesitation. No denial. Just confirmation. That simple acknowledgement was more disturbing than any threat she could have made. Vexthon's voice lowered. You are not afraid of us. Chen's expression shifted slightly. No. A pause. Fear is not part of the calculation. Silence. Even the bridge seemed to stop breathing. Vexthon studied her carefully. For the first time, he saw it clearly. This was not arrogance, not dominance in the traditional sense. It was detachment, as if his empire, his fleets, his wars, were variables already solved. He leaned forward slightly. If I ordered total mobilization, he said slowly, you would respond. Yes. With force, if necessary. A pause. And if I escalate further? Chen looked at him for a long moment. Then we escalate with you. The simplicity of it was terrifying. No anger, no rhetoric, just inevitability. Vexthon straightened. You speak as if you have already won. Chen shook her head once. We don't measure this as winning or losing. Then what do you measure? Stability. The word again. Vexthon turned away slightly. Stability at the cost of sovereignty? Chen didn't hesitate. Sovereignty still exists. You are speaking to us freely. Your fleets are intact. Your empire continues functioning. A pause. Within. Boundaries. Vexthon looked back sharply. Boundaries you placed? Yes. Silence stretched between them. Then Vexthon said quietly, You have turned my empire into a controlled system. Chen corrected him gently. We have turned your expansion into a controlled variable. That distinction hit harder than anything. Before it, expansion, not empire, not people, just motion. He stared at her. And if I reject this? Chen's voice softened slightly. Then you will discover what happens when uncontrolled variables are removed from systems they destabilize. The message was clear. Not spoken as threat. Spoken as outcome. Vexthon stepped back slowly. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, he felt something unfamiliar forming in his mind. Not defeat, not surrender, understanding, and it was. Worse than both. Because understanding meant he could predict what came next, and prediction meant he could see the limits of every path. He looked at the silent bridge around him, at his officers, at his fleet beyond the viewport. 3,000 ships, and none of them mattered in the way they used to. Finally he spoke. Maintain current positions, he ordered quietly. No one moved. Then he added, No, escalation. The tension in the room did not vanish, but it shifted. Because for the first time, the Empire had just obeyed a constraint it did not create. Next. Vexthon stood in the silence of his command chamber long after the orders had been given. No escalation. The words still felt unfamiliar in his mouth. Not because they were difficult to say, but because they were the first orders he had ever issued that were not meant to extend power, only to avoid consequence. Outside the viewport, the infinite dominion drifted through space like a god that had forgotten what it was worshipped for, and beyond it, the human presence remained. Unmoving, unreactive, absolute in its stillness. 47 systems, a net across his empire, a boundary that did not tighten. Because it did not need to, his aide approached carefully. Your Majesty, he said, voice restrained. The regional governors are requesting clarification. They are asking if we are under siege. Vexthon didn't turn. What would you call it? He asked quietly. The aide hesitated. Control without occupation, he admitted. A pause. That is what they are seeing, yes. Vexthon let out a slow breath. Even his own officers were beginning to find words for it, words that did not exist in imperial doctrine, because nothing in their history had ever behaved like this. No invasion force ever stopped at the gates and simply waited. No conqueror ever surrounded an empire without taking it. Unless taking it was not the objective. He turned back toward the main display. The map still hovered there. Hundreds of systems, and among them, human signatures like fixed. Stars, unchanging, unmoving, certain. Show me Earth again, he said. The hologram shifted. The blue planet appeared. Calm, small, surrounded by space that suddenly felt less empty than it should have. Vexthon studied it for a long time, then spoke softly. They never intended to expand, he said. No one responded, not because they disagreed, but because they were afraid to answer incorrectly. Vexthon continued. If expansion was their goal, they would have taken systems already. He turned slightly. They are not reacting to us, he said. We are reacting to them. A quiet realization spread through the chamber. Slow, uncomfortable, undeniable. The tactical officer finally spoke. Your Majesty. If their intent was containment, then their strategy is complete. They only need to maintain current positions. Vexthon nodded slowly. Yes. It was becoming something structured, layered, controlled, and in the middle of it all, his empire sat quietly, untouched, but no longer unobserved, as if waiting for something to be decided above it. A new transmission arrived. Vexthon accepted it immediately. She appeared, as always, composed. But now the background behind her was different. Not a desk, not a quiet command room, a strategic operations hub, multiple fleets visible behind her in real-time coordination. You are escalating, Vexthon said without preamble. Chen did not deny it. We are responding, she corrected. To an external invasion, Vexthon replied. Yes. A pause, then she continued. And containing it before it spreads. Vexthon's eyes narrowed slightly. So now you expand your containment. We reinforce boundaries, she said. The distinction no longer mattered. Expansion, containment, defense. All of it was motion, controlled motion. Vexthon gestured toward the display. You are building a second ring around my empire. Yes. And a third beyond that? Chen paused. For now, 2 layers are sufficient. The casual nature of the answer made the bridge fall silent, as if she were discussing infrastructure, not galactic war. Vexthon stepped closer to the hologram. You are creating zones of control across interstellar space. We are creating predictable boundaries around unpredictable actors, Chen replied. And what am I in that system? Vexthon asked quietly. Chen looked at him for a long moment, then answered. A stabilizing partner. The words did not match the reality he was seeing, but they were spoken with complete certainty. Vexthon's voice lowered. The Krelvax are collapsing. Yes. And if they break through your outer layer? Chen did not hesitate. They will meet the second, and if they break that, a pause, then we adjust again. The simplicity of it was horrifying, not because it was violent, but because it assumed endless capacity, endless response, endless control. Vexthon turned away slightly. How many layers do you have? He asked. Chen's expression remained unchanged. That depends on the threat. A silence followed. Then Vexthon said quietly, You are not defending space. Chen tilted her head slightly. We are managing it. The correction was subtle, but absolute. Behind him, one of his officers spoke carefully. Your Majesty, the Krelvax fleet has reached the outer Imperial buffer zones. Vexthon did not react immediately. He already knew this moment was coming. On the display, the Krelvax advance collided with the human outer layer, and unlike before, this was not containment around Earth. This was engagement at scale. Entire sectors lit up with coordinated interceptions. Human fleets no longer hesitated. They moved with full doctrinal execution. Every Krelvax attempt to advance met immediate suppression, not destruction alone. Denial. Denial of movement. Denial of regrouping. Denial of momentum. The Krelvax fleet began to fracture, not from loss of ships alone, but from loss of structure. Vexthon watched it carefully, then spoke quietly. They are breaking faster than expected. Yes, the tactical officer admitted. Human response is overmatched relative to Krelvax coordination gaps. Vexthon's eyes narrowed. That is not overmatch. He paused. That is experience. Silence. Because now the implication had shifted again. The humans were not reacting to the Krelvax. They were familiar with this pattern, as if they had seen it before, or something very similar. A realization formed slowly in Vexthon's mind. You have done this before, he said into the transmission. Chen did not answer immediately. Then, yes. A single word. He felt the weight of it instantly. You have contained other invasions. Yes. How many? Chen looked at him calmly. Enough to recognize the pattern. Vexthon stared at her. You allowed my empire to expand into this region knowing this would happen. We positioned ourselves where necessary, she corrected. The distinction again, always phrased differently, always structurally precise. Vexthon's voice tightened slightly. You were never reacting to me. Chen met his gaze. No. A pause. You were always between stabilizations. The words settled heavily. Behind him, the battle continued to unfold. Krelvax ships collapsing, human fleets tightening the perimeter, a system responding not emotionally, but structurally. Vexthon finally turned away from the display, and for the first time since he had begun conquest across the stars, he understood something fundamental. His empire was not the apex of power in the galaxy. It was not even a primary actor. It was a region inside a much larger equilibrium system, one that had been observed, modeled, and now adjusted. He spoke quietly. What happens when all threats are contained? Chen's answer came without hesitation. Then stability continues. A pause. And if stability is disrupted again? Her expression remained calm. Then we respond again. Vexthon closed his eyes for a moment, not in defeat, not in surrender, in comprehension. When he opened them again, he gave the only order that still made sense. Maintain observation status, he said quietly. No engagement unless necessary. The bridge acknowledged immediately, but the shift had already happened. The Empire was no longer acting as a dominant force in its region. It was watching. Inside a structure it did not build. Waiting. With everyone else. Next, the Krelvax Dominion did not retreat. At least, not in the way lesser empires retreated. They fractured, splintered across multiple vectors as their command structure collapsed under sustained pressure. What began as a unified invasion force dissolved into competing warbands, each attempting to salvage dominance in isolation. To them, it was adaptation. To the humans, it was expected. Vexthon watched it unfold from the infinite dominion with a eye or stillness that had replaced his earlier command certainty. The galaxy map no longer felt like something he ruled over. It felt like something he was allowed to observe. On the outer containment layer, human fleets tightened their formations further. Not expanding, not conquering, compressing. Every Krelvax attempt to push forward was met with immediate, precise denial. Not annihilation alone, but removal of strategic options. Advance routes disappeared, supply corridors collapsed, escape vectors were quietly blocked. It was not war in the traditional sense. It was correction. Status of Krelvax forces, Vexthon asked quietly, His tactical officer looked at the display for a moment longer than necessary. Severe fragmentation, Your Majesty. Command hierarchy is no longer coherent across sectors. Vexthon nodded once. And human losses? A pause. Minimal compared to engagement scale, but consistent learning patterns detected. That caught his attention. Explain. The officer hesitated. They are no longer adjusting after engagements, he said carefully. They are adjusting during them. Silence followed. Even Vexthon turned slightly. That is not possible, one of the senior commanders said immediately. The science officer shook his head. It is continuous adaptation. Each engagement modifies fleet behavior in real time, as if every ship is sharing combat data instantaneously across the entire network. Vexthon's gaze returned to the map. So it was not just coordination, it was shared cognition. Not a fleet, a distributed system, a single mind expressed through thousands of vessels. A new transmission opened. Chen appeared again, but this time, she was no longer alone in frame. Behind her, multiple command interfaces flickered with live combat overlays. Fleet formations shifted continuously like living equations. You are observing efficiency gain, she said. Vexthon didn't waste time. You are accelerating. Yes. Why? Chen paused for a fraction longer than before. Because external aggression does not scale evenly, she said, a subtle shift in tone. This level of force requires faster stabilization cycles. Vexthon's eyes narrowed. You are optimizing your response. We are maintaining equilibrium, she corrected. The words were becoming predictable now, but their implications were not. Vexthon stepped closer to the hologram. And if I ordered my fleets to intervene in this engagement? Chen looked directly at him. You would create instability inside a correction cycle already in motion. A pause, and we would respond accordingly. There it was again. Not threat, not warning. Structure, cause and effect. Vexthon's voice lowered slightly. You are treating war as a system to be balanced. Chen did not deny it. Yes. A silence followed. Then Vexthon spoke more slowly. And my empire? Chen's expression softened just slightly. Is part of that system. The sentence landed heavier than any weapon impact report. Behind him, the tactical display updated. Krelvak's forces dropping below operational cohesion thresholds. Entire sectors becoming silent, not destroyed, not occupied, just neutralized, removed from active instability. Vexthon turned away from the screen. For the first time, he did not feel the instinct to respond, only to understand. Report from the outer rim, his aide said suddenly. Vexthon turned sharply. Speak. The Krelvak's remnants are attempting negotiations with local systems, the aide said. Some are requesting asylum, others are attempting surrender. A pause. But human fleets are not responding to those requests. Vexthon's eyes narrowed. Why not? The aide checked the feed. They are being classified as non-viable actors. Silence fell again. Vexthon understood immediately. Not extermination, not mercy. Classification, a system deciding which entities could be integrated into stability, and which could not. He turned back to Chen. You are deciding who is allowed to remain part of the galaxy. Chen shook her head once. No. A pause. We are deciding what actions are allowed to propagate. Vexthon stared at her. The distinction no longer felt meaningful, because the outcome was identical. Then, a new alert spread across the map. Human. Fleets shifting again, but not toward Krelvak's remnants, not toward Imperial systems, outward farther.